So Alaska has 141 active volcanoes. So the volcanoes are a real threat for the people that are living there. But there's one volcano, if it erupted, could spew the ashes as far as Portland. So Portland is further south than my ranch, so I could get the ashes too. That's why I think I have to report about Mount Spurr again, because scientists are now saying this thing could erupt pretty soon. Mount Spurr is a stratovolcano, pretty visible in the Eruption arc of Alaska. That's what it's called, and it's named after a United States Geological Survey geologist and explorer Josiah Edward Spurr, who led an expedition to this area in 1898. And the Alaska Volcano Observatory currently rates Mount Spurr as level of concern, color code yellow. The last eruption happened in September 1992, and the mountain is quite high. It has an elevation of 3,374 meters. So just today, the USGS has given out an update. Current volcano alert level is advisory. Current aviation color code is yellow of this 11,070 feet tall volcano. They're saying unrest continues at Mount Spurr volcano. Seismicity remains elevated with numerous small, shallow volcanic earthquakes detected beneath the volcanoes over the past day. So March 18th, March 17th. A small steam plume originating from the summit was observed in clear satellite and webcam view. So something's coming out. So the Alaska Volcano Observatory is closely monitoring Mount Spurr for signals that could indicate that the volcano is moving closer to an eruption. And they're saying based on previous eruptions, the changes from current activity in the earthquakes, the ground deformation, the conditions of the summit lake that is there, and of course the fumarolic activity would be expected. So that should intensify if magma began to move closer to the surface. So if an eruption occurred, it would be preceded by additional signals that would allow them to give a warning. How long that warning would be, you never know. So they're using local seismic stations, they're using infrasound, a web camera, and GNSS stations, along with regional infrasound, lightning networks, and satellite data. So it's a well-observed volcano. And the Alaska Volcano Observatory has given us a good summary, like something like the weekly bulletins that the INGV releases for Campi Flegrei. That is really rumbling. They have just upgraded the March 13th earthquake, the 4.4 to 4.6. That is the strongest ever, probably since the last eruption in 1538 or even longer than that. It's not confirmed that there were bigger earthquakes than that. So this is massive. So the Alaska Volcano Observatory says the likelihood of a Mount Spurr eruption in the next few weeks or a month has increased. So they have done overflights on March 7th and 11th, and they have measured significantly elevated volcanic gas emissions. Check. One sign that something could happen from the Mount Spurr volcano. And they have seen newly reactivated fumaroles, that are these gas vents. They were also seen at the volcano's crater peak vent. Also then check. Then we have elevated earthquake activity, check. And the ground deformation is continuing as well, check. So all these criteria that we need, they're happening. They're further saying that the increase that they see in gas emissions confirms that new magma has for sure intruded into the Earth's crust beneath the volcano. It's there, and that indicates that an eruption is likely, but of course not certain, to occur within the next few weeks or months, maybe even days, who knows. So they say the most likely outcome of the current unrest is an explosive eruption or eruptions, several, like those that occurred in 1953 and in 1992. So each of those eruptions has lasted a few hours, And these eruptions have produced ash clouds that were carried downwind for hundreds of miles. And minor ashfall, about a quarter inch, was happening or was coming down over south central Alaska communities. What they're now expecting over the coming days and weeks is to see further increases in seismic activity, gas emissions, and surface heating prior to an eruption, if there was one. So such a stronger unrest, they say, may provide days to weeks of additional warning. And what they're showing us here, and that's interesting, they're showing us the overflight, what they have measured. They have measured 450 metric tons per day of SO2 from the Spur summit vent. So you see this here in this graph. It's showing the flight track of an airborne gas survey. Colors indicate the total amount of sulfur dioxide above the aircraft. As measured, they have used an upwards looking spectrometer while they were flying. So this is how they were flying, a little bit chaotic. So the colors indicate the total amount of sulfur dioxide. And it makes sense that where there is this vent at the crater, that there it is red, that we have the most there. So the gas plume that is emitted from the summit at Mount Spurr right now was clearly detected. It's drifting south right now, south of that active vent. And it has increased. If you compare it to December 2024, it has an increase from less than 50 metric tons per day to 450 metric tons a day. That's a lot. They have also measured increased CO2 at the summit and at the crater peak vent, 2 miles, that's 3.5 kilometers south of the summit. That's why they said it's going south. The CO2 concentrations at crater peak were especially high. And what is concerning is that in the past, when they saw concentrations like this, it was prior to eruptions. And I'm not only talking about Mount Spurr. In general, if you have such an observation at a volcano, you can be pretty sure that an eruption is coming. And then we look at the list of the earthquakes. So over the last month, they have located over 100 earthquakes per week under Mount Spurr. And you see the green bar, that's the aviation code, that is yellow right now. And then you see the earthquakes per week. These are the blue bars, and you see how it has increased. And the largest earthquakes you see here, they go into the magnitude 3 range. The magnitudes have also increased. And then the bottom, we have the daily outward motion in centimeters measured from Mount Spurr with the GNSS station. So you see that has also intensified a lot. And if we look at the next graph with the blue dots, these are the earthquakes. The bigger the circle, the bigger the earthquakes. The most earthquakes are also shallow, less than 2.5 miles deep. That's or 4 kilometers below the sea level. And the magnitudes are as large as 2.7. And if we go back within the last year, since April 2024, over 3,400 earthquakes have been located underneath the volcano. The ground deformation continues since then. The total movement away from the volcano to date is about 2.6 inches. That's about 6.5 centimeters at the closest GNS station. And they have done modeling of this inflation, and it is suggesting a source around 2 to 3 miles, that's 3 to 5 kilometers below sea level, and about 2 miles, that's also 3 to 4 kilometers west of the Mount Spurr summit. That's the source. That's where the magma chamber could be. That's where the magma is coming up. There's lots of snow right now and ice. So the collapse of snow and ice into the summit crater at Mount Spurr, into that lake that is there. You don't really see it that much because it's covered with ice. this has formed during this period of unrest. It continues. And then there's steam emissions from these fumaroles within the crater and around the crater. Then they have found like new diffuse steaming from small snow-free spots that are within the crater, because that steam is so hot, so there's no snow. You see this here in this picture, how they're coming up. And that began on March 6th, so that's new. That means pressure is building up. It's like a pressure cooker. They're telling us that these locations have been snow-free sporadically for years, but they have not seen any steaming since 2008. So they are pretty sure that new magma has intruded underneath the volcano, and that therefore the probability of an eruption has significantly increased. And they think it's very likely that the magma has been already accumulating beneath Mount Spurr underneath the summit for some months. So the recent gas data, they say, suggest that there is definitely a new pathway forward towards the crater peak vent that has opened, and that fresh magma may rise and erupt there. And that crater peak is also the site of all historic eruptions that this volcano has produced in the past. And the last known eruption that occurred from the summit of Mount Spurr is several thousand years ago. So they're giving us 3 potential scenarios that could happen at Mount Spurr. Scenario number 1, explosive eruption or eruptions, like those in 1953 and 1992. In this scenario, we will see 1 or more explosive vents. Each of them will last as long as a few hours. They will produce ash clouds carried downwind for hundreds of miles, and minor ash fall of about a 1/4 inch over south central Alaska. The flanks of Mount Spurr likely would be swept away by pyroclastic flows like hot avalanches, and would be impacted by ballistic showers. Mud flows, lahars, could inundate the upper Chakachatna River Valley. And what would happen in scenario number 2? Lava is forming and or small explosive eruptions. So it is possible that the volcano could erupt less explosively than it did in 92 and 1953, and it could produce lava flows and produce a lava dome, or it could also add to that brief explosive eruptions. So a mix of everything a little bit. But the good thing is such events would have less far-traveled impacts. But the lahars, like these mud flows in the drainages around the volcano, are still possible. And of course, number 3, that would be good, a failed eruption. If the magma stalls, it's an intrusion, it doesn't reach the surface, it can't break through. That has happened before, by the way, in 2004 and 2006. Then once that intrusion happens, then afterwards we see the earthquake activity, the ground deformation, the gas emissions, and the surface heating slow down gradually over time. Probably will take several weeks or months. And then number 4, the worst case scenario, a large volcanic eruption. That would not be good. They say for sure eruptions larger than those in 1992 and 1953 could occur. And these would likely result in larger ash clouds, thicker ashfall deposits, and greater overall impacts. No such eruptions are known in historical times. That's the good thing. And the geologic records suggest that these are rare. So let's hope that they're not happening. The likelihood for something like this is low. Their conclusion is that they're giving us in this update. They're basically saying we cannot assign an exact time frame for when an eruption will occur. If it does, but the increased gas emissions that they have recorded just a few days ago suggest that an eruption may occur in the next few weeks and months. We expect to see additional changing to monitoring data prior to an eruption. as magma needs to move closer to the surface. This would indicate a change in the rate and also the character of the earthquakes that we see, the onset of sustained seismic tremor, further increased gas emission, changes in surface deformation, and a lot of melting snow and ice. And when we look at the 1992 eruptions, changes like this occurred about 3 weeks prior to the first eruption. So that would be enough warning time. But it can also give less warning time. So should there be earthquake activity or like other monitoring data that suggests that an eruption is likely within hours or days, then they would raise Mount Spurr's aviation color code from yellow to alert level, advisory, like code orange or even code red. That means alert level or warning. But then they're saying, and that's always what concerns me the most, is while they do expect additional changes to the monitoring data prior to an eruption, it is also possible that an eruption could occur with little or no additional warning, because basically it is giving a warning already. And that would be extremely hazardous for tourists that are doing recreational activities at Mount Spurr or near the valleys and the ditches and the rivers. They call this drainages, but also for planes that are flying over the volcano. And then in addition, CO2 and SO2 emissions are currently already elevated and may pose a hazard to anyone in low-lying areas around or downwind of these gas vents, such as within the crater's top crater peak and spur summit. Because CO2 is a colorless, odorless gas. And hazardous areas of high CO2 cannot be detected by sight or smell. And that's the problem that they have in Naples at Campi Flegrei. People were feeling dizzy over weeks and months and nobody detected it. So we should monitor the sky and see where this ends, guys. This was just a quick update. Check out all my Campi Flegrei updates because there's news after news after news. That's why I'm releasing so many updates, because I think this information is very, very valuable, what all these scientists are saying, guys. And if you want to support the channel, become a monthly member. With a monthly membership, you get behind the scene videos. Or go to my buymeacoffee.com/silky site. It's all, the links are in the description of this video, or, you know, the supers here on YouTube work as well. So thanks for doing this. Right now, the coffees, everything goes towards Apollo, my dog that is sick. Many of you know that, and you've supported him so much, and you've been sending him so much love. I'm grateful for that. So the link is in the description, guys. And I hope you're safe. And I hope you're doing great, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye-bye.